Hi there, and once again, welcome back to Larinas Labyrinth. If you are a return visitor, I thank you very much for your ongoing support. I've decided, as I stumble over my words, I've decided to create a series of videos to address things like our emotional capacity to rationalize and to manage emotions as well. And this is because when I was studying, we discussed the topic of what is called emotional intelligence. And referred to as EI. And basically, people with high emotional intelligence are becoming the preferred employee for big businesses. I mean, besides the fact that it's really good common sense for self-help, you know what I mean, and to heal ourselves of whatever barriers and obstacles that we might have, just as a personal development exercise, it's really good for all of us. But anyway, where I'm going with this is, I'll deliver it in the style that would be approved by World Health Organization in alignment with what I was taught at university, and also in alignment with the disclaimer that any of the content that I provide may actually be out of date, and you might find stuff that's more current out there these days. And just a reminder that I am no longer registered with my professional body, so nothing that I deliver should be considered to be professional information. But I will put up resources for you to go and do your own research as I go along. What else can I add to this? Probably not a lot more. It will reveal itself as we go through the process. But in the meantime, thank you very much for your journey with me. Now, by the way, while I think about this, I wanted to put to you that for those people that find benefit from the content that I'm creating here, especially this mainstream clinical type stuff, please, if you would like to donate, I would be more than happy to receive. It takes me hours and hours, and it actually costs me a lot of money, of course, to go to university as a mature age student, raising adult people and caring for people with complex issues. So basically, I will put up a link at some point in time, and all donations would be appreciated, even if it was for a cup of coffee. Anyway, moving on to the content here today. So when we talk about emotional intelligence, I'll explain what that means to you in a moment as per descriptions, but I also want to point out that emotional intelligence, you'll see it referred to over the internet as EI, but it's also referred to by some people as EQ, meaning emotional quotient. I believe that the EI terminology came first, and that's what I'm going to stick to because it's easier. Anyway, it's the ability to perceive, interpret, demonstrate, control, and evaluate and use our emotions to communicate and relate to others effectively and in constructive ways, right? So this is basically where we're going. So the ability to express and control emotions is absolutely vital to living well, but so is the ability to understand and interpret and respond to the emotions of others. You know, that business of we're not all an island. You know, some experts will suggest, and it's certainly appearing that way these days, as I say, within the professional fields, that emotional intelligence is becoming in higher demand than actually intellectual intelligence, which is quite interesting. So once again, just referring back to the slide, to perceive and understand emotions, to interpret them, to demonstrate and control emotions, to evaluate them, and to be able to relate effectively to others. This is what EI is. So managing our emotions is extremely vital, just, even if we weren't thinking about anybody else, for ourselves, okay? Because when we lose our capacity to regulate, it clouds our vision and it will impact on our decisions. And to just put this into perspective, have a think about a time when you were completely overwhelmed by stress and that you made a decision that impacted negatively on you. So the important point is messengers, right? Emotions are messengers. They tell us really useful pieces of information, not only about ourselves, but about others. And sometimes facing our emotions can take us out of our comfort zone. But emotional intelligence actually is this process of going through the discomfort to come out the other side of it. And so what I'm going to do is give you some useful information here today, and this video is going to be part of a series. So this is part one of a series. Just remember these key things. The emotions are messengers. They communicate to us our feelings. So the benefits of developing our EI, emotional intelligence, is basically because it enhances the quality of our lives overall. Because we as humans, we're hardwired to connect to other people and to build relationships. Anyway, so by drawing upon the strategies and techniques that I'm going to give to you throughout this series, you will develop a heightened level of self-respect, put a value on yourself. Consequently, there's going to be an opportunity for better and healthier relationships. And this brings in obviously greater happiness and joy. Now, ideally, this is why, if EI is in demand with businesses, which it definitely is, certainly within the corporate sector, then there's an opportunity for business and financial success as well, and to be able to command better income and wages to reflect your qualities. So you can expect to have success within those situations as well. And this is largely all because as we develop emotional intelligence, we have this capacity to interact with other people in more enriching ways, and to build positive relationships. And this, of course, if we're talking about within the business and financial setting, it's a case of these people become the leaders within a really good organisation. Personally, I think it's helpful if the business owners and the business hierarchy actually have emotional intelligence at a high level as well. So some of the literature, or a lot of the literature out there, says that the indicators of a person with high IQ is that they're able to not only identify and describe their feelings, but they have an understanding and awareness of their personal strengths and limitations. They've got self-confidence and they can accept themselves, including their mistakes. They can forgive themselves for their mistakes. Not only that, they're able to adapt to changing circumstances and situations, so they've got flexibility. They have a curiosity and interest in other people, as well as empathy, concern, and care for them. And they're sensitive and receptive to the feelings of other people. Able to accept responsibility for mistakes. Well, that's kind of up there for self-forgiveness, I believe. And they're able to manage difficult emotions in difficult situations. And that, I believe, is the core indicator, as far as I'm concerned, about whether or not a person's got a high level of IQ, EI or EQ. So there are tests that you can do to assess your own levels of EI, if you like. There's two methods. You can actually get a professional assessment done to establish where you're at, or you can do an online assessment. I had a bit of research, sorry for the pursing and clucking that I do when I'm concentrating. I did a bit of research and I went to a website that I'm aware of through my studies called Mind Tools, because that actually has got a lot of really good information on there. And I noticed that they have a series of questions that you can ask yourself and rate yourself from 1 to 5, and then do a calculation, and that will rate you apparently. So anyway, I'll be honest and state that I'm not sure that this little test is going to be truly accurate, but I would say it's a good starting point. So I've actually put the link to the website in the description here. Basically, the tests are designed to evaluate a person's social and emotional abilities and to identify these people as strong leaders. There's potentially, I would imagine, a lot more informal online resources, hopefully free, as part of you conducting your own explorations and investigations. So depending on which website you're actually going to find your information, there seems to be a little bit of a debate about what the components of EI are, but there are 4 primary levels that we can assess to establish where a person is sitting as far as their emotional intelligence goes and what kind of leadership qualities they might have. So there is the suggestion that there's 4 different levels. That's the emotional perception, which is what we call self-awareness as well. And then there's the capacity to rationalize the emotions and use them effectively. And then the ability to understand and manage emotions. Now, we're going to look at these specifically and individually over the next slides. So obviously the first one is self-awareness, because we have to be aware of our limitations and our triggers and that kind of thing before we can actually work upon them. So when we talk about self-awareness, we're talking about understanding our own emotions. This is the first thing that we need to do. Now, I'm not going to be able to do this particular subject justice in this video. This is going to have to be a different video. And so I will be addressing this in the future because there's a lot of emotions. But in a nutshell, what we mean is that somebody who has difficulty recognizing their emotions and expressing them would be the sort of person that goes, I'm angry. And you go, angry? Like raging red angry, steam coming out your ears type of anger? Is the top of your head blowing off angry? Or are we just feeling a little bit frustrated? Are we a little concerned, like this little baby on the screen here with its bottom lip out? You know, I'm just a little bit frustrated, not sure if I'm angry, I could be sad, right? So there's this business of being able to identify the emotion. So I'll be doing that in a future video. But for this particular video, it's to outline that it's very important that we be able to accurately recognize our emotions, because when we can recognize them, we can manage them, and we can also recognize within this process what our limitations and strengths are. That's going to help us to make healthy decisions, especially going forward for our future. It also, when we look at our emotions and explore them deeply, then we start to understand also what our motivations are and what our triggers are. So I love this. There's little images on this slide of the magnifying glass, you know, with the person's eye on it, and then the other one with the person looking in the mirror. It really is a case of you don't have to wait until you're having an emotional reaction to actually step back and take a long, hard look at yourself and go, right, what happens when? So I'm going to give you a couple of scenarios here. In fact, actually, realistically, you don't wait until you're in the middle of a crisis reaction or emotionally overwhelmed to take this long, hard look at yourself, because when you are in the midst of an emotional reaction, your vision is clouded. So you've got to do it when you're actually calm, perhaps post a crisis or post a massive reaction. Okay. It involves interpreting not just the big behaviours, but also the subtle behaviours and the subtle expressions of emotion. And one of the reasons why self-awareness is attractive is because it can indicate a humility of a person, because we are all human at the end of the day. We are all in a process of development, growth and maturity. And it's through understanding our emotions that we recognise when we're taking things personally, and when we need to act upon something, or when we need to let go of something. So this is all about, as I say, ultimately, you becoming creator of your own destiny. Now, the first stage, I guess, of evolving is that business of when we are over emotionally sensitive, then we can become overreactive. So a prime example of this, I tried to think of a demonstration, is when we're at work and we see the boss and he's absolutely going off like a firecracker, and we start to get fearful because we think, well, I haven't done anything wrong, you know. So you've got to be able to recognize that fear and anxiety is occurring within you, but then that becomes an opportunity to resolve the matter, and that it's healthy to be assertive and to turn around and ask the boss, number one, is everything okay? Of course, you've got to be able to assess as well whether or not the timing is right to do these kind of actions. If the boss is in the middle of an absolute storm, you might want to wait until they've calmed down, or you might want to turn around and say, is everything okay? Is there anything I can do? Or you might want to just duck into the nearest room. It depends on the person. It's all context, right? The point is, by being assertive and asking the questions, then you're going to be able to establish whether or not your fear or anxieties are relevant, because the boss might turn around and say to you, no, I've had a crap day. You know what I mean? I've had X and Y, Z, and I'm just having a really rough time. And you can turn around and do I'm sorry to hear that. Is there anything I can do? Or you can say, well, I'll leave you to it then. It's up to you. But at the same time, if you ask them at the wrong time and they don't have a lot of emotional intelligence, they might rip into you and transfer it all over to you. So this is where understand your emotions is the first point. Understand what's going on. And at the very least, if you feel that anxiety, then it's a case of just stepping back. But anyway, we'll get onto that to the next stage, or on the next slide. For now, on this slide, there's some questions that you can ask yourself as part of developing your own personal understanding of what emotions are for you, and bring them to the surface. Be able to recognize them. The first question that you would ask is, do you find yourself experiencing overwhelm and rapidly changing emotions from one moment to the next? Does it feel like you're on an emotional roller coaster? And I would also put in there, does it always feel like this, or does it feel like it just now? Because obviously, if life is one ongoing emotional roller coaster, there may be some deeper issues going on there. Then the other thing is, have you noticed within yourself, or do you have the capacity to notice within yourself, the early warning signs about emotions? These are the sensations that are in your body, and this could be muscle tension perhaps in your neck or your jaw, clenching of teeth, butterflies in your stomach, tightness in your chest, and maybe even your throat closing down if you've got panic type disorders. Okay, then another question would be, when you experience the subtle but individual emotions, where you can actually identify them and unpack them and go, am I unhappy or am I sad? When you know these emotions, right? Do other people pick up on your feelings because of changes in your facial expressions, such as smiling or frowning? And do you recognize when you are exhibiting your internal state because of the expressions, these non-verbal communications? And for instance, sometimes people might presume that you... Actually, I'm going to personalise a little bit here. I have been accused by people in the past, because they misunderstand, or that they don't recognise. Okay, when I concentrate, I frown, apparently, right? So this is obviously a gesture that I am not aware of. Well, I am now, but people have said, oh, you look angry because you're frowning. I'm like, I'm not frowning. But from where they sit, I look like I'm frowning. So because they mention it, then they can be reassured, no, I'm concentrating. And that's what happens when I concentrate. I get two little lines between my eyebrows. In fact, I thought most people did. But you know what I mean? This is an example of it. Of course, I'm putting a bit of my own spin on this content as well, and this is why you'd be wise to do your own research. Okay, so the next question that you would ask is, when you are experiencing intense emotions, because if you ignore the subtle signs, or if you don't have capacity to see them, when you're having these big emotions that gain your attention, are they gaining just your attention, or are they gaining the attention of everybody around you? Because for me, I thought about this and I thought, well, you know what? It's kind of like that by the time you're having a big reaction, like the little tantruming child, you're not doing your emotional journey along. You've actually got probably potentially unwilling passengers that are along for the ride on that roller coaster with you, whether they wanted to be there or not. But I'd like to think that these people that are with you and observing your emotional state are actually your friends and trying to help and support you. And then I think probably the most important one, and this is the reason why I've got the image of the box up there, is, do you actually pay attention to your feelings when you get them, whether they're big, small, or whatever? Do you acknowledge them? Do you embrace them? Or do you ignore them until they're so big that nobody can do anything about it? And the other thing is, do your emotions inform the decisions that you make, or lack of decision making? Are you living impulsively? Now, if you're the sort of person that ignores your emotions and sort of goes, oh, I feel angry, I'll just push that down, that's actually called repression and denial. Oh, I don't like anger because that's a bad emotion. I've read it on the news or I've seen it in books and nobody likes angry people, so I'll just pretend my anger doesn't exist. No, that's internalizing suppression and actually quite unhealthy. Anyway, within this, I thought I'd share a story, which is, I do recall a mental health clinician saying to me many years ago that the idea of a therapy with the unpacking of emotions, I'm going to put a little thing in here where you explore the root cause, like, oh, I feel really sad, or I knee-jerk in these situations because I had such and such happen to me many years ago. It made me very sad, and I relive this, okay? That's not necessarily in the best interest of everyone, okay, particularly if they have got a history of trauma, because repression can be a survival mechanism because there's been so much pain in a person's life. And so basically, what they do is they grab all these intense emotions, they push them down into Pandora's box, so to speak, and put the lid on it. So this has to be handled very, very carefully. So I would say to people, if you do start to work on this emotional intelligence business, which I do recommend that everybody do, that doesn't mean that you have to pull out the old wounds or pick scabs. Okay, you don't have to pick the emotional scabs, and it can be actually loaded with risk for people. It can lead to self-harm episodes if we pick the scabs in certain situations. So please, if you start to feel unwell or unsafe in any particular situation, go very gently with yourself, pull back, and get the appropriate support so that you can help managing these wounds. You don't need to be like the bull out the gate trying to do it. Be gentle. So, managing emotions is a crucial component of EI, and we wouldn't be human if we didn't have feelings. We all have them, including those people that have got EI. They just manage it really well. They might still have actually, no, I don't think they would get into large emotions anymore because they're actually aware. They've reached a state of awareness. Moving on with this. Okay, so self-regulation is, as previously said, in the first instance, it's recognizing the feeling before it gets bigger than Ben-Hur, okay? It's that muscle tension or tingling or whatever. But when the emotions get bigger, then obviously we've missed our cues to be able to address it, or alternatively, something has happened in our environment that has triggered us. And it might have come with absolutely no warning. It could be, for example, that you're at work and something has gone off like a firecracker. I just want to remind people who have got really serious symptoms of perhaps rumination, generally the trauma disorders. For you, the key is actually not to dig into the emotion, but allow yourself to feel the emotions, right? That muscle tension and that kind of stuff, to be aware of your emotional reactions, but not to dig into them. Because if you start digging into them, there's every chance that you'll start ruminating and you may actually re-traumatize yourself. So going back to the scenario of the person in the workplace, and it's completely unpredictable. You didn't see it happening. The bosses walked in, they're absolutely vile, and they've decided to turn their anger and rage on you. Now, you will not have had time potentially to feel those early warning cues, the tension. In fact, it may happen so rapidly that you go from 0 to about 8 or 9 and escalating at a rapid rate of knots as this person's firing off at you. The key then still is to control and regulate that emotion and not react to this person in that anger, because obviously there's going to be consequences to whatever you do or say. So it's a matter of controlling your impulse. You know, one of the articles that I saw refers to this being the lowest level of EI is when you can actually recognize your emotion and name it. Now, I would disagree with that. I would actually say the lowest level of EI is when you actually can feel the emotion, but you're absolutely unable to manage your response. And by this, I mean, quite often, you know, we'll hear people in jest turning around and making jokes about, and I was so angry I could have just poked their eye out with my pencil, you know. Of course, that's a joke, but there are people that will actually get in there and will thump. You know, they will become physically violent. Well, certainly my clients might have in the past. If they get triggered, if a boss came in and did that, they wouldn't think twice about actually punching somebody on the nose. So I would say they are probably the least EI out of everybody. And I'm not judging them badly. I'm just saying that that's the way it is. Then there's another scenario, which is, you know, if you're not at that point of thinking, oh, I'm going to poke your eye out with a pencil, you might be having all these thoughts running around in your head like, you know, you so-and-so, you come in here and you do X and Y because you're triggered, you're reactive, you know. I mean, you didn't see it coming. They've just come through the door and there you are, you're copping it. So you have a choice there too. You can pause and reflect on that and think, do I really want to say what's going through my head right now? what might be the consequences. Because if you let that filter go and you just let go with what's in your head, that's not necessarily going to be helpful either. And in fact, it probably will be inflammatory. So when we talk about regulating emotions, we're talking about responding appropriately to the situation and in proportion to the situation that we find ourselves in. Obviously, if somebody's super duper aggressive, somebody's always got to back down as part of keeping the calm, or just keeping safe. But that doesn't mean that you don't do anything about it. It means that you reflect and pause. You take that pause, and if you're in a situation where obviously you're safe enough to remain there, you do your breathing and do some of your mindfulness exercises as part of calming yourself. And if you've looked at the videos that I've put up on the anatomy of distress and stuff like that, you'll know that when you're doing this breathing, if you've just had this heightened emotional reaction, especially if it's related to anger and fear, you've just kick-started and gone into the brainstem, which nobody can think rationally or logically when they're in the brainstem. So you've got to try and using your breath, get back to the rational, logical processing part of your brain so that you can manage and control these impulsive reactions. I'm trying to keep this video short. Goodness me, I'm trying. Okay, so one of the things that you might be able to do, dependent on the scenario, is that while you're controlling the impulses, is take space, try and maybe go out the back for a cuppa or something like that. And while you're out there, if you can feel tension in your chin or your jaw because you're clenching your teeth, give yourself a little facial massage while you're out there. You might then be able to get a grip of your emotions, as they say, put on the handbrake and realise that you can only put the handbrake on for a temporary time frame. You might be able to go back into the boss and say, look, actually, I'm not feeling so well today. I need time to process what's just happened, and I need to go home. It all depends because obviously if you become unable to manage your emotions, then there becomes a health issue potentially. So it's up to you to determine what the risks are and that kind of thing for you. What I would say though, what I want to add to this is when I was going to uni, we were taught how to reflect, because obviously this is a skill too, and we were given a reflective tool to use, and one that I actually really like to this day, and it's the Gibbs reflective framework. The reason why I like it is because when stuff goes down, you can take a really good look at yourself with this by just writing it down and reviewing it in the third person. You know, what happened? What did I feel? What did they do or say? What do I think? What can I do now? What would I do in the future if this happened? So this becomes a personal and professional development tool. I will put a link up if I remember. But alternatively, I might run a video on how to do the Gibbs reflective framework, because it's just so beneficial for everybody, and it helps. It obviously helps to rationalize, process, and gain this self-awareness that we all need to have. It certainly is part of emotional intelligence. So by taking the space and time to reflect and doing something like the Gibbs reflective framework, not only do we have this time to consider what outcomes might occur from picking a particular option, we can also reflect and consider what our motivations are. You know, this is part of knowing ourselves, and that is self-awareness. You know, what are our hopes and our aims? Are they egocentric? Is it all about me? Or are your desires driven by a desire for peace and harmony for all? That doesn't mean that you have to give up on any of your dreams or aspirations. There are considerations as well as part of ensuring that all our actions support the goals. This includes, you know, are we being drivers of our own destinies, or are we allowing our emotional reactions to drive us to our destiny and then acting like we're victims of circumstances? I mean, if we refer to the business of I wanted to poke my boss's eye out with a pencil, for example, well, that's a form of control, and trying to get them to stop what they're doing and saying. I mean, obviously, the scenario I painted was one that, of course, you want them to stop. But that might be unreasonable in a different situation, you know? So this is something that we all have to reflect on when we're calm. What happened? How did we respond? Was it suitable? Was it appropriate? What's happened since then? Has it compounded the problems? All of this kind of stuff. But most importantly, we get down to motivation. What is my motivation? You know, understanding and knowing what motivates you within any situation, especially, let's say, if we're talking work, because as I say, EI is very popular, or high EI is popular with management in the corporate sector, and it's been identified that they have a thirst for personal development. They're highly driven to succeed at whatever they perceive success looks like for them, and they are likely to want to shift to their goal because it helps them to grow, and they would do it whether they are paid well or not, because that's the bottom line. They're motivated. They want to achieve this success, and they're not motivated by things like fame, status, or recognition. They're motivated. They're self-driven. Okay, so the relevance of this within the context that I provided is, you know, you'd be asking yourself, am I even motivated to retain the job here? You know, if you like everything else that is about the job beyond that scenario I just painted, then you may want to resolve that conflict in a positive way. And so you would ensure, or you would be wise to ensure, that any of your reactions or behaviours would support this goal. If you don't want to continue with the job, for example, self-preservation would likely kick in, because most people are not in a position to afford to be out of work. But obviously, I would imagine that somebody in that situation would start looking for other work and hang in at the current job until they've got another one. So rather than go into this whole process of reflection, like I said, I'll do a separate video on it in future, but you could Google things like reflective tools if you think you're ready to do something like this and it interests you. So part of self-awareness includes understanding not only what motivates us and what drives us in regard to our decision-making behaviours, but also what inspires us to pursue positive change, and what others might want as well within the context of what we want. This requires the skills of being curious enough to establish what drives them and what their motivations are. Now, it also means that you're interested in achieving your own goals, but you're not self-centered. So the ability to have empathy will help further your social and workplace goals, with you being able to set aside your own thoughts and to focus wholly on the social interactions in the moment, right? So this means really listening to what people are saying, and it means paying attention to both their verbal and non-verbal cues. And when we've got the capacity to do this, we are able to see whether or not a person is being authentic in what they're saying, or whether or not they're saying what they think we want us to hear, or if they're even holding back what it is that they want to say. So this is a communication that's based on the give and take, and it's a wonderful opportunity to learn more about yourself, because within these conversations, you will continue to learn. You don't get diminished in any way, shape, or form. As you have these interactions, you might, as an example, start to feel a little bit uncomfortable. You'll feel, especially if there's differences of opinions or beliefs, you will start to feel perhaps some muscle tension, and this will teach you something about yourself and your values. So a large part of EI is about being able to think about and empathise with how other people are feeling. So this is very much a leadership quality. It really involves the release of judgment about them and their responses. And if they share their feelings with you, then it's about asking yourself, well, how would I feel if that happened to me? If I was in the same situation, how would I react? It's that old walk a mile in their shoes stuff, and then you might understand, well, we can't all walk the same path as each other. So instead, what we try and do is understand and hold compassion to the other person. And that was one of the things I was taught at uni as well, is seek understanding in all things. But I also learned that within my spiritual path, I must say. Because most people are just trying to do the very best that they can, and quite often under very difficult circumstances. I do see another problem, And I'm not sure if I'm having glitches with my microphone. I certainly hope not. I've just seen something happen. Okay, so going back to this, I have seen online a lot of people that refer to a quote by Brené Brown, and I'm not going to repeat it here, but it's it's not correctly anyway. It's along the lines of if you've got empathy, then you're willing to climb into the abyss of a person who is in suffering, and you're going to hold them in your arms and stroke their hand and really help them. You share their pain, you feel their pain. Well, I got myself into a lot of trouble at university because I argued that, because she seemed to be flavour of the month. Now, bottom line here is I come from a space of having been in the abyss on more than one occasion, and I have known many people that have fallen into the abyss, and I don't know any single one, including myself, that would have an expectation of somebody to jump in there with them and hold them. And in fact, I don't even see that as an empowering or strength-based response to somebody that is in a huge amount of suffering. Okay, I probably could be quite scathing about it. I wasn't at uni. I was a lot more tactful, but I'm not at uni now, and I'm not reliant on them, and I don't need their approval to have an opinion. But what I would be inclined to say is somebody with lived experience actually would prefer not to have somebody jump down and cry with them, but they would prefer to have someone throw them a life raft or a lifeline and tow them to the shoreline, not get muddy with them. They might like to have that person lie on the shoreline gasping for breath, if they've just pulled them out the white rapids of life, going, that was a lucky save, but they don't expect other people to carry their pain for them, because they know how heavy that burden is, and they would never, ever put that burden onto anybody else. You just wouldn't, not if you've got any, actually I shouldn't say that. I'm going to be quiet about that. I'm just going to say that, look, honest to God, I do not know anybody who has really experienced this deep level of suffering and gone into the abyss that would expect other people to carry their burdens for them. I'll just think about this for a sec before I say the rest of it. Right, so the rest of that sentence is basically, you can be very helpful, you can be very loving and kind without having to fall on your sword. Okay, so I don't see that throwing a person a rope as opposed to jumping into the abyss is being self-centered or uncaring. I actually see that throwing a rope is about trusting that person enough to know that they can actually take care of themselves. They just need to get to the shoreline. Self-centered to me would be somebody that sticks their head over the top of the abyss and goes, "Oh, rough day," and walks on. Okay, that's different. That's no empathy, and that's pretty awful, actually. And it happens every day in life, because I've worked with a lot of these people in these scenarios as well. I don't just have personal lived experience. I've worked with a lot of people that have really, really gone on tough times. So the other part of EI, or high EI, is that there is this ongoing desire for personal and professional improvement, and within that, social skills can be improved. Okay, we are never stuck where we currently are, and anybody can develop social skills, but from my perspective, they need to be taught. Although we can self-teach, but I can honestly say it wasn't until university that I learned some of this terminology, and I was taught, if you like, where to go to find the information that I could use to help improve myself. So there's plenty of information on the internet if you want to do your own learning independently, and these are some keywords that you could look for. I will do another video in the future as well, looking more at this, because this is a big subject. Okay, when you start talking about verbal and non-verbal communications and cues and that kind of stuff, I probably could do 4 videos, maybe 1 video on each cue. I'll see what I can do going forward. Anyway, basically these skills are developed and include the attributes of empathy, because they help to build good workplace teams. And it's where there is another awareness, or where there is another, I'm sorry, bad English, and it's my first language. It's where there is an awareness of others with respect and regard to all parties within conversations and workplace meetings. And these skills include good conflict resolution skills. Everybody that attends a meeting ends up feeling valued, And for example, if you've developed these skills, you've got really good active listening skills, you've got good eye contact, your body language is open, and you're able to develop a rapport with the other team members or people if it's not at work. You are perfectly capable of taking the lead or acting as a mediator or whatever else might be required at these scenarios, if you like. So we can use emotional intelligence within our daily life, just day-to-day living. And rather than, I think, speak to all of these bullet points, because obviously this video is getting a bit long, I'll trust you to be able to use the pause button if you want to read what these attributes are. As previously stated, there's lots of things that you can do to develop your EI to strengthen these personal, professional, and social connections to experience better overall health. So let's be real. Before I finish up, we're getting close to the end. There's a reason why corporations want leaders with high EI, and that's because they're focused on productivity. And at the end of the day, it's all about the dollar and results for them. And it's been identified in research that where there is high EI managers, they have higher profits and productivity because the staff will work together as teams in harmony when they've got a good manager, and the high EI manager recognises that his team members are all important. It's that any successes are not just about the one person. He doesn't. If his team is successful, it's not down to him. Just because he's managing it doesn't mean that he made the project happen. The good EI manager knows that every single member of that team contributed to the success, and he recognises, I say he, but it could be a she, recognises that each member of the team has value. And when they get good quality staff, they want to be able to retain these employees that work well together, and so they will look after them. So it's a win-win for everybody. They look after their valued staff, and their staff, because they are motivated within the context of the slide on motivation, they would work probably long hours, everything else, and do everything they can to make that project succeed, because actually they are highly motivated and passionate about the project that they're working on. So this is what employers want, because it's all about dollar for them. You know, I shouldn't say it's all about the dollar for the employers, because actually I would imagine there are some very successful employers that have recognised this. Perhaps they've got high EI themselves, but either way, the good, healthy, functioning team has a good, healthy, functioning manager, and they're all passionate and driven to succeed, and that bodes well for every single person that's on that team. So think on that as we go on to the next slide. So I want to make the point that everything that I've mentioned on this slide will only work so far, okay? Because it's really important that you find your tribe. And this is what a good team is. They've found their tribe and they work together really well, and it's pleasant for them, okay? I will do a future video on Find Your Tribe, because I can see that there's a lot of stuff on the internet that isn't necessarily accurate, of course, as usual. And based on my own experiences, I disagree with some of the content that's online as well. I saw somewhere where they're saying that, you know, if you've got high EI, it acts as an armour or a buffer against workplace bullying. Well, I can tell you it doesn't, actually. Or I'm certainly not convinced that it does, because not that I think that I'm super high EI. I'm not, but I do have a reasonable level of development where EI is concerned. I'd like to think so anyway. And I experienced quite savage workplace bullying because I was a threat to my manager, and I know that. So I can look back on that, and I can look at the content now and say, you know what, you can know all of this stuff, but it is not always easy to apply practically. So it's through the lens of hindsight that I'm able to look at that experience now and say, you know what, actually, my boss was threatened by me because I was actually calm in a crisis, and I had to address some quite significant crisis in the workplace. It was a psychiatric setting, and yes, anyway, so I now look back and I think, actually, we can have all of this information, but if we haven't found our tribe, we're still going to experience a lot of that conflict. And depending on what our circumstances are, sometimes it's difficult to actually navigate the decisions and choices. Sometimes we can have EI, but we can also have limited choices depending on what is happening around us. So either way, I will do a video soon on find your tribe, okay? Otherwise, do some research yourself. There's plenty out there. And I'll just go to the next slide now. So talking about find your tribe actually made me think of the angels and the angel content that I'm loading. So before I close out, I just want to remind you that even if you're not into angels, but especially if you are, that there is a playlist dedicated to the blessings and angel magic. And if you do take the time out to explore the content, you will find lots of tips on how you can develop your self-awareness, raise your consciousness, and even identify and release limiting behaviors and break some old patterns and cycles, right, that keep you locked in this pain and suffering. And if I really want to go to town on it, that prevents us from accessing the joy and happiness that I believe, obviously, is ours by divine right. Now, the reason I'm linking this with the Find Your Tribe is because there is an angel, or you can actually ask them. When we talk about the angelic realm, we're talking not about finding your tribe, we call it Find Your Soul Pack. Okay, so you can put out using one of the rituals that I will load up. It's not up there yet. But how to invoke a specific angel to be able to connect with your soul pack. So that will be on the radar. And I just would like to encourage people that if you think it's not true and it's not for you, keep an open mind. Don't rule it out simply because it's not your experience and it's not something you believe. I continue to tell people I was not always a believer, but obviously now I am. And I would go as far as saying I'm not just a believer, I'm absolutely convinced. So, my friends, now I'm going to love yous and leave yous and start preparing the next videos. This is about all I can give you today because at the end of the day, it's still a long video and I'm trying to get them short. Yeah, I really am. Take care, stay safe, be blessed, enjoy your newfound strength, because you will continue to grow resilience. Leave a comment for me if there's more information, or if you want me to prioritize on a certain aspect of the content that I'm delivering at the moment, then let me know and I'll do my best. And don't forget, if you like what you're seeing and hearing, please do press the like and subscribe buttons. If you do click the bell to be notified, just be aware that if I'm not uploading the content yet, there's a lot that's going to be uploaded very soon, and it's going to be coming through thick and fast because I'm currently working on about 21 videos all at the one time. I'm multitasking and I don't want you to feel spammed out. But in the meantime, have a wonderful day. Be blessed. Take care. Pleasure having you on my journey. See you on the next one. Bye-bye for now.